Hi, welcome to Punchline Talks, the business breakfast briefers. I'm Mark Owen, and each week I invite a panel of business experts to review the morning newspapers, find out what's happened in their own individual business, their own individual business sectors, finally what's caught their eye in this week's Punchline. But before I start, I just want to thank our fantastic sponsors, Hazelwood's Accountants and Business Advisors. Okay, let's meet the panel. Today we've got Chris Nelson, he's the Police and Crime Commissioner for Gloucestershire. Gloucestershire Constabulary are the county's fourth largest employer with over 2,400 employees and a budget of £170 million. The police have never been under so much financial strain. So we'll find out from Chris what is the shortfall and what are the pressure points. We have Keith Graham. He's the owner of the famous in Cheltenham. He moved his original business, Morgan DeVere Menswear, from Gloucester to Cheltenham, bought up the famous name. He's been in retail for over 50 years, so we'll find out for him what the retail world is like at the moment, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And finally, never last but least, we got Ian Mean, MD, MBE, Director of Business Works, ex-editor of The Citizen, Echo, Western Daily Press. He's one of Gloucestershire's leaders, movers and shakers. So we'll find out from him, what is the mood music out there for the business community before the budget on the 30th of October? Okay, we're going to quickly review the newspapers. What is making the headlines courtesy of the BBC? Okay, here is the Daily Mail. Boris, my manly pep talk with Harry in bid to stop Brexit. The Daily Telegraph. I told Harry not to leave the UK, reveals Johnson. I think he's got a book coming out somehow. The Financial Times. Reeves ready to tone down tax raid on rich non-dons. The Eye. Budget rule change risks higher interest rates for longer, Reeves warned. The Times. Reeves set to profit by tweaking debt rules. The Guardian. Netanyahu says Lebanon strikes will go on despite ceasefire call. The Mirror. How did he escape justice? My goodness, it's shocking, bad story. The Metro. Why jacked on a rush hour trains? The Daily Express. It feels like they don't want him to come back anymore. The Sun. I'm a celebrity. Get me Osbeck in here. I think that's how you say it. And the Daily Star. Attack of the creepy dolls. Okay, let's do it to the panel. Ian, let's start with you. A right mix old bag this morning, isn't it? What have you gone with?
Right mixed bag, but a lot of good stories. The Mirror, how did he escape justice? Referring to Fired, and the excellent BBC Two program this week, which started this. It is astounding that the police received 19 sex abuse claims, but nothing ever came of that. I think the background to this week has been the reset that Labour wanted to make, but it's been a bit of a disaster, hasn't it? And in the Independent, Sebastian Payne has written a great piece saying, with a headline, Mr. Rules ended up breaking his own. And I thought that the whole thing has been pretty hypocritical, frankly, and you can't really justify that. My old paper, the Daily Mail, as you mentioned earlier, Boris has a book out, and the Mail starts serialising it tomorrow. Headline, Boris, manly pep talk with Harry in bid to stop Megxit. I don't see that as a great story, frankly. I'm sure they hope it will sell some papers. There's a story that I'm very interested in, which is in the Times, and also there's a piece in the Mail about Rolls-Royce now in the race for these mini nuclear reactors. I've been doing a lot of work over at Berkeley and Albury, where we hope that the first of these mini nukes, SMRs, are going to be placed. Really tragic story that's leading the Western Daily Press today on young lady, 33-year-old Alice Webb, who's died after this Brazilian butt operation. She died in Gloucestershire Royal. She comes from the Wootton Under Edge area. Guardian of any paper probably does the Lebanon story best. Netanyahu says Lebanon strikes will go on despite ceasefire call. I mean, that's an amazing sort of situation. Those are those are my main things.
Okay, it really is a mixed bag. Thanks ever so much for that, and thanks for buying so many papers in. I know you're like me. In fact, all of us. We had a little chat beforehand that we all love the papers. It has so much depth to it, doesn't it? Rather than reading it online. Chris, let's go over to you. What have you picked out for us, please?
Yeah, well, I've looked at the Telegraph, and like Ian, there seems to be a lot of book deals going on at the moment and in the press. And I was looking at the story on Mrs. Trump, who's got a book out, and it's an interview with her talking about what's recently happened over there. I used to live in America. And I find American politics, just like British politics, endlessly fascinating. And there's plenty of material to talk about over there. And obviously, Trump has had that recent assassination attempt on the golf course. And we had another attempt on his life a few months back. I mean, it's dreadful. You think America would have stopped that sort of thing, shooting its leading political figures. But it's a real potboiler, really, the American election. And I watched the debates. I thought the Trump-Biden debate, Biden completely trashed himself, and the Democrats were in denial about Biden. But with Kamala now, she's looking strong. So I suppose the money is on her winning in November.
Well, God, I hope so. Ian, you had your hand up. What would you like to say?
Well, two things, I think. America, it's consistent about the gun laws, aren't they? They do nothing about it at all. And we see
it's the gun lobby. It's all the lobbyists in America. That's the biggest problem, isn't it? They're so powerful. I'm going to bring Keith in now. Thanks ever so much. Have you got anything else, Chris, or are you okay with that?
That's it.
Okay. Keith, welcome to the show. What have you picked out for us?
Well, after Ian's talk, there's not a lot left for anybody else to say. So it's all right. I think the Al Fayed story is absolutely appalling, and the fact that so many complaints were made and that nothing was done about it. And it's a bit like the same with Jimmy Savile previously to that. And it was quite interesting that Keir Starmer was the director of public prosecutions when all of this was being reported. And I know the police will take the blame for this, but they do their investigation. They put it up to the CPS for their take on it and to see whether they are going to recommend taking a prosecution forward. And then you have the CPS not doing their job properly, yet the police really will take the blame for it, which I think is extremely unfair to them. So that's the main thing. And I think this happens so much in public life these days that that the people in charge don't do their jobs properly, and then everybody suffers as a result of it.
Sorry, Keith, these are historical cases, and I think what's happening is going back to crimes that were committed in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I'd like to think the processes are in place nowadays for people to step forward, but
well, I don't think you see a lot of sign of that, to be honest. I think there has been some slight improvement, but I don't think enough, if you want my honest opinion. I think the other two big stories are all of the hypocrisy with Starmer in particular, and the amount of money he's taken from donors. I mean, he has an income as Prime Minister with his wife as well of over £220,000 a year, yet he can't afford to buy his own suits and spectacles. Yet, he says it's within the rules. I reported it. Well, if he'd got any sense of moral duty, he wouldn't have taken the money in the first place, whether it's within the rules or not. And even then, when he reported that he'd had it, it was retrospectively because he sought advice as to see whether he should report it in the first place. So I think it's a total hypocrisy, and he's taken twice as much as any previous Prime Minister. I think it's absolutely shocking. And then the other big story this week is what's going on in Lebanon. But what I say, Israel's getting a lot of stick at the moment. But if in this country, we had, say, Scotland shelling with independence was shelling the north of England on a daily basis. Do you think we do nothing about it? Israel aren't the aggressors in this. I do believe their response has been probably slightly disproportionate. But if the Arabs would come to accept that Israel as a state has the right to exist and tries to cooperate and work with them, I think you'd get a much better solution. At the moment, the Arab policy is try and wipe Israel out, which is, I think, is wrong. And you don't get this reported. All you see is these poor children getting killed, which obviously nobody's going to agree with. But they never drill down into the real problems. This sea to land policy that the Arabs have got is futile because it's not going to happen.
Well, it's a very, very complicated thing, and I don't agree. I think the proportional response has been just mind-bogglingly bad. We just cannot fathom what the hell is happening over there. We can't relate to it at all. I'm going to stop that there, Keith. Okay, we'll go on and leave the papers for now. Thanks ever so much, all of you, for such a great mixed bag of stories. Right, Chris. The police, it is under immense pressure. So where are we at now with the budget? You've got 170 million pound budget. There is a shortfall. What is the shortfall, and what are we looking like at the police at the moment?
Yeah, in year I'm looking at just over 3 million that I want to try and save, and then next financial year I want to save a total. I need to save a total of about 7 million, which is a big proportion of my overall budget, and only 80%, some 80% of the budget is people. So it doesn't leave a lot to look at to try and find efficiencies and effectiveness. In my first term of office, I was focusing on getting the force out of special measures, the engage process that His Majesty's Inspectorate do, and that's what I was fully focused on, and we got out in a very quick order. I'm now focusing more on efficiency so that we squeeze every single pound that we've got from the taxpayer and balance that budget, because over time inflationary pressures have created these problems. And the 20,000 extra officers that we got nationally, the government put restrictions on keeping those figures maintained. So I can't reduce, for instance, I can't pause officer recruitment to balance the budget because I'll have a financial penalty. So the focus in terms of people is on police staff.
Right. Okay. And I know you put a pause on recruiting PCSOs. Now, we've talked in the past, Chris, you and I are big fans of PCSOs and the work they do in the community.
Yeah, huge fans. I'm a huge fan of neighbourhood policing. I think forces that don't focus on neighbourhood policing and crime prevention are moving towards special measures. If you look at the Met, if you look at Greater Manchester Police, there are two big forces where they moved away from neighbourhood police and they fell spectacularly in special measures. Manchester have got themselves out really well. The Met are struggling to get out. So neighbourhood police are the core bedrock of police forces. And if you focus on crime prevention, the so-called volume crimes, things like burglary, bicycle theft, vehicle crime, and things like that, it sets the scene throughout your community in a nice way. Because if you allow volume crime to get out of control, antisocial behaviour, for instance, graffiti, if you allow those sort of things to get out of control, they can become gateway crimes to more serious and organised criminal drugs type crimes, and you lead to a worse place.
Okay, let's bring Keith in and then Ian quickly. Keith.
The one point I'd like to make to Chris is that the whole police service needs reorganising. To have all of these regional police areas is really out of dated now. And if you had a much more national police service, you'd be able to make a lot more savings by that type of organisation rather than all the individual county forces. But nobody talks about that. I understand the pressure that Chris has got because of the number of people he employs, and that's where most of his budget goes. But the police have resisted reorganisation for very many years that's been talked about. But I do agree with him that if you actually deal with the problems at the lower level, it sets a good tone for how the police are working. I mean, in Cheltenham, where my shop is, we've had a major problem with graffiti, and everybody's been trying to get that dealt with, but it's been going on for years, and it's thousands and thousands of pounds worth of damage that's done, and it appears that nothing's done about it.
Okay, I mean, Chris, I'm sorry, Keith, I'm just going to stop you there. I'm going to bring in Ian as well, and then Chris can answer these over, and then we'll move on.
Chris, 2 points. One, the issue of police dealing with a lot of people suffering with mental conditions, which takes a lot of time, big issue. And number two, shoplifting. I mean, there's a story yesterday that the Co-op is saying some extraordinary figure they're losing a year, hundreds of millions of pounds. People just walk in, take stock, disappear. The staff are told, don't approach people. Now, I understand this is difficult. 2 big points for you there.
Yeah, no, if I may respond to those, I kind of agree with you, Keith, that there's perhaps too many forces, and I'd be open to a regionalisation idea. It may be being discussed by the new government. They've got all sorts of ideas to reform police, although I would caution and say that our big urban forces like Manchester, like the Met, like West Midlands, they've all been or are in special measures, and size brings a whole set of problems of its own. But I personally am open to talk of reform. I'm a huge fan of devolution and mayors and moving away from the centralisation of London. So very open to adult conversations about that sort of thing. On graffiti as well, I've just started a new pilot where we're working with the Cheltenham bid and the Borough Council to map the problem, clean the existing graffiti, and try and find long-term solutions to graffiti, because it's not a simple issue. These youngsters that are often doing it are bored and are looking for things to do, maybe low self-esteem. So it's a multi-agency solution that needs to be used to solve graffiti. Our new leader of the bid has come from Bristol, where they have serious graffiti problems, and I value her experience. On Ian's point on police doing too much to help other services, he's right. Too often, the police are the service of last resort. We help out where the NHS social services have got personnel problems, but we're pushing back and have done for the last couple of years to try and find more headroom to deal with our core task of dealing with things like offenders and criminals, and shoplifting as an area where perhaps we've taken our eye off the ball for a little length of time, and we need to do better.
Okay, we're going to move on there, Chris. I don't want to turn it into kind of let's pick on Chris. You're here as my breakfast guest. No, thanks ever so much for answering those honestly. And okay, let's go over to you, Ian. The mood of the business mood at the moment. Okay, I mean, we talk a lot, and I think things are treading water at the moment. That's what I hear. What's your take on it, right across the board?
Entirely, business is in waiting, so to speak. What are they waiting for? They're waiting for the budget. I've just looked at the Times today. I've got a headline which sums it up, actually, on a piece by Patrick Maguire. It says, only one woman can rescue Starmer now. And we've talked a little bit about stories in the papers, but, you know, it is incredibly gloomy. And I'm really concerned about business. Business wants an opportunity to invest. That's what they want. We were both yesterday at the launch of the Gloucestershire College Construction Centre event in Cheltenham. Really good situation. In my view, growth, which this new government talks about consistently, will only come if we do things like construction and build and develop skills. What I'm concerned about is that there's a little sign that that business, particularly SMEs, are going to be getting any sort of help on investment. So I think it's pretty gloomy. In terms of Gloucestershire, what are the main issues? Main issues for me are housing, social housing, provision of housing. That's a very, very major situation. But in terms of business, we want a feeling of confidence. I see no confidence coming from the government at all in terms of business help.
No, I totally agree with all of that sentiment. Thanks ever so much. Keith, let's go over to you. I've known you for quite a few years as well. Obviously, you're a bit of a retail guru. You've been around the block a few times on the retail map. What's it like for you at the moment? You know, owning a shop there, not far from the prom.
Well, I agree with what Ian has just said. It's about lack of confidence. You can't see any way forward at the moment. I think we all hoped when the Labour Party came into power that this doom and gloom that has existed in the run-up to the election would evaporate and things that people would become more positive. But they've made such a ham fist of it all with all of their proposed taxes and the taking away the winter fuel allowance to pensioners and just basically talk the country down. What we need is a lot more positivity. But the other thing I agree with Ian 100% on, we have got to train our young people to skills so that they can go in and make a contribution in the workplace. And I don't think nearly enough is done in that direction. You've got to have a degree of positivity, but also a direction so people can see a way forward and say, yes, I want to get into that because I know it's going to give me a better life and I can enjoy my life much more, earn good money and have a rewarding career. So I think this is what we just need, more positivity, but we need more direction from the government to encourage this. And people like Ian, who runs it.
Let's talk about your business, though, Keith, and also the retail sector in particular. I mean, what's it like on the high street at the moment? Is it tough?
Dreadful. It's absolutely dreadful. People aren't coming in. I mean, we actually just recently had a Saturday where we took virtually no money at all. That's unheard of because people are just frightened to spend money at the moment because they think they're going to have all of their pension pots raided or their taxes raised and this is the issue at the moment. We don't have any clear direction. I think once we have this budget, perhaps we'll see a bit more clarity in the government's thinking and the way forward. But at the moment, people are frightened to spend money because they just don't know what's coming around the corner. If we don't.
Sorry, Keith. Is this your neighbours? Is this your neighbours as well along there? You talk to other business people.
I talk to lots of businesses. I can tell you, everybody is struggling. I mean, in Cheltenham, where we've always had fairly full occupancy rates of the shops, you look at the promenade now. How many empty premises there are on the promenade in Cheltenham, which is principal shopping street. This is because nobody has any clear feeling of how it's going to go forward, and is it worth investing all of this money to try and develop a business when you don't know what's coming around the corner? It is really very bad indeed.
And so what about buying stock for yourself and looking ahead? How do you plan?
Well, we've had an awful lot of issues this year with stock because our wholesalers haven't wanted to invest into the stock, so we can't get it. I mean, I had an issue just recently with a major supplier. We have been doing quite a lot of dinner suits for people, and we're very short of evening trousers at the moment. They were promised to come in May, and we've now been told they're not coming in till November. So the wholesalers are not investing, so we can't buy the stock from them, and so therefore we can't supply to our customers, which is extremely worrying. And that's across the board now in all of the wholesale areas. People are not investing in their businesses, and therefore that has a knock-on effect right through the supply chain. And you can understand why they're not doing this. I mean, obviously, coming out of COVID, they were very cautious because they'd had all that enormous stock in their warehouses, which obviously they couldn't sell, and therefore it put them under huge financial pressure. But that is now continuing because they've slowed down, and also there's a lot of issues in China with delivery now. The Red Sea has caused a lot of problems with it taking much longer to come, but also the ships coming from China, where most of the clothing industry is made, or the Far East anyway. What they're doing is they're waiting until the ships have got enough containers to fill them up before coming. So if there's a delay in goods coming into those ships, that delays it even further. So it just makes it a very, very difficult environment at the present time.
So really wrapping up quickly, Keith, how do you see Christmas retail? I'm assuming that you're hanging in for that.
Well, I wouldn't hold too much my breath. I mean, in Cheltenham, we're fairly lucky in as much as the racing has a big effect in Cheltenham, and so we do a lot of tweed suits for people going racing, and we do quite well out of that, I must admit. But Christmas last year was very late coming because people just didn't want to come out spending. We never saw any upturn in Christmas until really virtually the beginning of December, and I'm not envisaging it'll be any different this year. I think the Christmas trade isn't what it was by any stretch of the imagination. It's much more special events. We do a hell of a lot of suits for weddings, for instance, and they've been very buoyant this year, and that's what's kept our business going. That and the racing community buying clothes to go to Cheltenham races. I mean, people don't realise what a big influence that has on retail trade in Cheltenham. It's enormous.
Okay. Unfortunately, we're kind of running out of time there, Keith. All right, guys, we're going to do the pick of the punchline. So, Chris, what have you picked for us? We only got a minute each, by the way.
Sir Geoffrey Clifton Brown and his election to be the chair of the Public Accounts Committee, probably the most influential committee in Parliament. So I think he's really excited to have that opportunity, and it'll be interesting to see what he gets up to.
Okay, thanks ever so much for that. Ian, what have you picked out for the pick of the punchlines?
Very good story. Creed Food Service, which you reported being sold for 70 million. I know Chris Creed very, very well. Great operator. His family started supermarkets really in a small way years ago. This is all about investment in the business. Business now turning over 129 million. 400 employees, great business, great operator, great supporter of Gloucestershire.
Okay, thanks for that. Keith, what have you picked out for us?
Well, unfortunately, Chris picked my story. I do quite like Clifton Brown as an MP, and I think being elected to that committee will be a very good thing. I think he's a very sensible MP, and I think he'll do a very, very good job. I also know Chris Creed quite well, and I think it's wonderful the way that business has built up, and now he's gone as part of that much larger group, but he's still going to stay involved in the industry, and I think that's extremely good news to make it an even stronger business.
No, that was my pick of the punchlines today. Absolutely amazing story for them, considering where they were during the pandemic and how they've come out of that, and to be the success they have, I think is a truly inspirational story. And unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today. I'd just like to thank my wonderful guests for joining us this morning. A massive thank you to our sponsors, Hazelwood's Accountants and Business Advisors. And finally, a big thank you for watching as well. In the meantime, you will be back again next week. And in the meantime, don't forget, it's all in the punchline. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.